Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the November 1st, 2011 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council, and welcome to the first day of November. There are agendas on both sides of the room, so if you'd like to pick up a copy and follow along with our meeting tonight, we would encourage you to do so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment on both general items as well as items that we will be discussing and voting on this evening. It is customary for us to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in time I would ask you all please rise and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the adoption of minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set tonight for consideration, and those are the council meeting minutes from October 18, 2011. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes from anyone on the council? Hearing none. All in favor of their approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? They are approved. Well, before we get to public comments, which is item 4 on the agenda, I have a couple of proclamations to read tonight. And we do have visitors here tonight with respect to both of them. So I'm going to begin with a proclamation that will be given to the Daughters of the American Revolution. And we have Virginia Gary here tonight to accept the proclamation. So thank you for being here, and I will read it, and then we'll go from there, and I'll ask you to come up. Whereas the history and culture of our great nation have been significantly influenced by American Indians and indigenous peoples, and whereas the contributions of American Indians have enhanced the freedom, prosperity, and greatness of America today, and whereas Native American Awareness Week began in 1976, and recognition was expanded by Congress and approved by President George Bush in August 1990, designating the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month. Now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim November as National American Indian Heritage Month in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all our citizens to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Dated November 1st, 2011 at Downers Grove, Illinois. So if I can ask Ms. Gary to please come up. I will provide you the proclamation. We'll stop for a quick photo, and then if you have a couple words you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear from you. So if you wouldn't mind coming right up here so the folks at home can see you. How are you? Thanks for being here tonight. I'll give this to you, and that's one for the home crowd. Thank you very much. If you want to go to the podium and share a few words, we appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tully and Commissioners. And since 75 years, the Daughters of the American Revolution have sponsored scholarships for the Native Americans. And the most recent one is undergraduate and graduate school support for Macomb College in Oklahoma and the Chemawa Indian School in Oregon, and the Indian Youth of America summer camps in Iowa, Oregon, Arizona, South Dakota, and Iowa. And what is fairly new, they require the Indians now to study their own native languages and their own cultures to give them a sense of worth for all the contributions they've done. So thank you very much for the proclamation.
Thank you, Ms. Gary. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for accepting that proclamation. The second proclamation I have is with respect to Small Business Saturday, and we have Linda Kunze here for the Downtown Management Corporation to receive this one. So once again, I will read it and then present it to Linda. Whereas November 26, 2011 is Small Business Saturday, a nationwide campaign to spur business for small merchants. And whereas Small Business Saturday is a day to come together in support of the small businesses we love. And whereas small businesses are comprised of the shops and restaurants that employ our neighbors and reinvest our money close to home. And whereas small businesses are the heartbeat of our community and local economy. Now therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 26, 2011, as Small Business Saturday in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all citizens to support businesses in Downers Grove this holiday season and every day thereafter. So, Linda, if you would please come up, I can hand you the proclamation. And likewise, if you'd like to comment, we'd love to hear from you, but don't feel obligated. Good to see you. There you go. And what I like about Doug, he's the only text on his side.
I would just like to say thank you on behalf of all the small businesses in Downers Grove. This will be a special day, and this will take place the Saturday of our Gingerbread Festival weekend, which you will all be invited to come down for. So thank you very much.
Splendid. Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you for being here. Those are all the proclamations I had tonight, so that brings us to item 4 on our agenda, public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where we entertain comments of a general nature on matters that are not appearing on our agenda. So if anyone has a comment of a general nature with respect to a matter not appearing on our agenda, now would be the time to please come down. We ask that you come to the podium, please give us your name and address, and we'd love to hear from you. Good evening, Mr. Phelan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff. I saw this article in the Reporter about the Benton House, and I'm wondering what is the story on that? We paid $460,000 for the building. We spent probably another $100,000 on stormwater improvements, and then we're going to sell it for $280,000 minimum. Now, I don't know. They say that it's at 80% of the real estate value. Didn't we know what that $350,000 valuation was before we bought the house?
I'm going to either ask the village manager to weigh in on that, because I couldn't jot down the numbers as fast as you mentioned them, but I'm sure that we can put that together and answer it. Or Mr. Fieldman looks like he has that gleam in his eyes.
We do. We have an answer for Mr. Falish, and others have called on this. The village purchased the property on Benton Street with the intent of constructing much-needed stormwater storage facility, and we did that. It's actually an underground storage facility. We originally had planned to purchase the property, demolish the house, and just have the stormwater facility there. What we were able to do is actually purchase the house, install the stormwater facility in the side yard of this property in an underground fashion. We now are in the process of selling off the house and the remaining property, where the village would maintain an easement so that we can maintain that stormwater facility. The stormwater facility actually diminishes the value of the property because it's an easement right that we have. But we are able to get back a lot of the value of the purchase price we originally put in it. We are following a state process for the sale of the property, which requires us to use an auction, sealed bid auction. And the state law says that we have to appraise the property before we start this process and establish the minimum bid at 80% of the appraised value. So we are recouping some of the money that we had put in there. We still achieved our stormwater needs, and we're following the state process that sets a minimum, and we expect to receive more than the minimum in the process.
So as opposed to simply removing the structure and maintaining that unimproved for stormwater purposes, we're actually going to be able to recoup some of the cost of having purchased it in the first place.
That's correct. Any dollar we get on the sale is $1 that we did not expect when we started this process a couple of years ago.
Well, now does the $350 estimate, is that wasn't that available when you bought the house?
We did have appraisals when we purchased the property and an appraisal after we made the improvements, which again, the improvements actually diminished the value of the property, and we knew that going in.
And I hazard to ask, when was the first appraisal done?
A couple of years ago, 08, 09, somewhere around there.
And you can't build on the part where the stormwater is, so there's a big part of the lot that is now, you can't put a garage or shed.
But I would imagine the stormwater work has improved the whole neighborhood, right? Shouldn't that be
Well, it should, but I think what the point is that the stormwater work that was done actually restricts the usage of the property, therefore diminishing its value. So that's why its value is not what it was when it was purchased, because when it was purchased, it hadn't been encumbered by those easements yet.
What was the value when it was purchased?
Perhaps I could meet with Mr. Falish offline and go through all of his questions and get detailed answers to them.
If you don't mind, Mr. Phillips, I think it would probably benefit from having all those numbers in front, because I
Sure.
don't have them at my fingertips either.
Okay, and I want to mention snow.
Sure.
Because
Don't mention snow.
because it's
It's only
coming.
November 1st.
And, Mr. Roble showed you photographs of the property on, what is that restaurant up there? Anyway, it's one thing not to plow your sidewalks, but to dump snow on them in addition is even stupider. And I would imagine that we're going to have to come up with some penalty that would make it tough on these people not to plow their snow. And it's really difficult. Now, the high school kids north of Ogden have to go by that way, so that could be a problem too. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Falish. Commissioner Durkin?
Can I just ask a question regarding what Mr. Falish brought up regarding the house and the stormwater? The original concept, the original plan when we purchased that house was really to demolish that house and really make that either a dry basin, correct? So because we were able to do what we were able to do, which really wasn't part of the picture at the time, this is actually money we're recouping in the long run because we're not using all that money that we intended to use on the property, correct?
Yes, the purchase of a house and the sale of it later for a smaller amount is actually to our financial benefit because of what Commissioner Durkin just explained.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience of a general nature? Matters not appearing on our agenda tonight. Hearing none, we move to item 5, and we do in fact have a public hearing tonight. A very important one. It's a public hearing with respect to the village's fiscal year 2012 budget. There is an opening statement that I am asked to read that will sort of describe how we're going to proceed, and then we will in fact proceed as described. This public hearing will please come to order. This public hearing has been called by the Village Council to consider the proposed village budget for fiscal year 2012. Notice of this hearing was published in the Downers Grove Reporter, and a certificate of publication is made part of these proceedings. I would like to summarize the procedures which we will follow for tonight's public hearing. First, Dave Fieldman, Village Manager, will provide an overview of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2012. Second, there will be an opportunity for members of the Village Council to ask questions or make comments. Third, there will be an opportunity for members of the public to make statements or comments, or to submit written statements or comments for the record. Fourth, at that point, I will again ask if any members of the council wish to make a statement or ask a question. Fifth, after hearing all the above, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing. At this hearing, witnesses will not be sworn, and a verbatim written transcript of statements or testimony given at the hearing will not be prepared. However, a recording of the procedures will be made on village equipment and retained until minutes of the hearing have been prepared and approved by the Village Council. So now we know what we're going to be doing for the next X minutes, and we'll start off with the staff presentation with respect to the overview of the proposed budget from Village Manager Dave Fieldman. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. I do have a brief presentation tonight. While tonight is the public hearing, we've been enjoying a very open and extensive participative process as part of this FY12 budget proposal. You can see that we have a series of 9 meetings related to the budget and the related tax levy. And we are now into the middle of our chart here, and tonight is November 1st, so we are at the official public hearing of this budget. Quick overview, and this is found in the manager's budget message that's online and available at the library. This budget was prepared pursuant to several plans and policy documents, including long-range financial plan and many others, which guide the implementation and the preparation of this budget. The general fund, our main operating fund, is balanced with revenues equal to expenses. And in this budget, we are proposing to reduce the overall property tax levy for the village of Downers Grove due to local changes or changes in the state pension laws which are being applied here locally. This budget does allow for continued implementation of our water fund plan from last year, a multi-year plan to make sure our water fund is financially sustainable. And it does allow us to proceed with continued investment in infrastructure using dedicated revenue sources. Throughout the previous 4 or 5 meetings, there have been some changes to the budget, which I will outline. First, in the capital fund, a change that was directed by council during the last village council meeting. We have increased revenues and expenses in the capital fund by a total of $250,000. This will increase the funding for the new sidewalk program by $300,000. And specifically, we are using a $250,000 grant for sidewalks for the new sidewalk program, and we're shifting $50,000 that are no longer needed in other capital projects to the new sidewalk program as directed by the council. There also is another change I'd like to highlight. This is the first time the council and public are seeing this, but it's something that has been in the news quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And that is a couple of changes to our water fund. We are proposing to increase the revenues and expenses in our water fund by $1 million. This is in direct response to the DuPage Water Commission water rate increases. A little bit of background on these revisions to the water fund budget. First of all, the City of Chicago sells water to the DuPage Water Commission. The Water Commission, in turn, sells water to the Village of Downers Grove and other DuPage municipalities. And in the village, we sell the water to the end users or our customers. The DuPage Water Commission has announced a rate increase effective January 1st of 2012. This rate increase, in their rate increase, they are passing along not only increases by the City of Chicago for their water rates, but also elements pursuant to their 4-year plan, including making sure that they're financially sustainable. They are paying off some short-term debt, they have a capital plan, and they're positioning themselves for the expected loss of sales tax revenue that will be on them in 2016. So there are more elements in their rate increase than just the City of Chicago rate increase, but that is the primary component. The 4-year plan that was announced by the DuPage Water Commission includes rate increases as shown on the screen, 30%, 20%, 18%, and then 17%. The council may recall that we have a water model that was prepared as part of our water study last year. In that pricing model, we included 10% annual increases from the DuPage Water Commission. The numbers you see on the screen are clearly in excess of the 10% we put in our water model. So the village response and the staff recommendation is to pass through these DuPage Water Commission rate increases. We have a multi-year plan that we've been talking about for the last several months as part of this budget process. We had planned to increase water rates by 14%, 14%, 10%, and then 9% beginning in 2012 running through 2015. That was pursuant to the old model. Now with the new information available from the DuPage Water Commission, you can see the proposed rate increases on the right-hand side, 25%, 18%, 14%, and 14%. Again, this is just reflecting the cost of water for the Village of Downers Grove charged to us by the DuPage Water Commission. The end result is that the cost of purchasing water from the DuPage Water Commission will increase by $1 million in 2012. Therefore, the FY12 water fund budget reflects this change, and we've increased expenses by $1 million and then increased the revenues that we will recapture through the rate increases paid by our customers. Mayor, that ends my brief overview of the FY12 budget, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the next portion of the public hearing, which is the opportunity for members of the Village Council to ask questions or make comments with respect to the proposed budget. At this point in time, I will ask members of the Council if they have any questions or comments regarding the proposed fiscal year 2012 budget, understanding that we have met and discussed it on a number of prior occasions. Any questions or comments at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'll move to item 3, which is an opportunity for members of the public to make statements or comments or to submit written statements or comments for the record with respect to the FY 2012 budget. And I haven't seen anybody furiously scribbling any written statements, so I'm hoping there might be some actual live ones. Any members of the audience wish to make any comments or ask any questions regarding the proposed budget? And again, we have met on multiple prior occasions at which there has been opportunities for public comment, but this is certainly one of them. Mr. Roble.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Bill Roble, 7800 Queens Court, Downers Grove.
Having gone to the budget meetings at the firehouse and participating in all the narratives in previous meetings, the last one being on the 18th of October, and previous to that was October 11th. At the 18th of October, there was extensive discussion by the council about appropriating monies for the sidewalk fund to increase the schedule, and I believe it's in the workshop or part of the that was online where you said if you appropriate some more money, you could advance the sidewalk schedule, which I applaud. I believe in sidewalk safety. But at the same time, I wanted to address, when I was here last time, I had a chance, I didn't talk to you, but in subsequent time, it was explained at the budget meetings that traffic calming was being incorporated into the improvements, and I happen to be the recipient. Since I live in Nottingham, we're going to be rebuilding the streets. And since I saw you last, I got a letter from Scott Vasco, staff engineer, Public Works, telling me that we're going to have a meeting for the residents of Nottingham subdivision on November 15th, so I won't be here for the council meeting that day. I'll be at the Public Works. But in his narrative here, he mentions traffic calming if applicable. So I'm overjoyed that it's mentioned here, and as we move forward, when there's a major public works project, it will be incorporated in that budget. However, I'd like to call your attention to an inconsistency, as far as I see it, in proper funding of traffic calming applications and projects that have been approved but are waiting for proper funding. When we started traffic calming a few years back, probably 3 years now, the budget, there was $100,000 that was appropriated to the traffic calming situation. And it was subject to a second year appropriation of $100,000. And because of fiscal restraints, which I can very well appreciate, that budget has been eliminated. However, the process of entertaining applications from residents wanting the traffic calming for their streets, I came past Blodgett here, where Whittier School is, and so forth. I was at a traffic meeting, a transportation commission meeting back a year or so ago, and they were approved for traffic calming on Blodgett. And there's a study that says they should have a traffic circle by the school and so forth. However, this is all on hold because of funding. And on my street, Queens Court, there was a traffic study done a year ago, this past May, which showed that in front of my house, the 85 percentile of cars going down in front of my house, where it's posted 25 miles an hour, average speed was 34.9 miles per hour. And what I'm doing is belaboring the fact that you have many things to spend money on, but at the same time, projects that are here that have been approved are wanting for support. It's not new; it's something that's old. But before we move forward, we should, how would you call it, address that something that has been on the back burner and needs action. And all it needs, when I say action, it needs to be funded. So I ask you to reconsider before you make the last budget. There's time to change it. Also to probably instruct Public Works to find some money to utilize some of the traffic calming devices that are currently warehoused in Public Works, but are sort of in warehouse instead of being functional, being on the streets as a temporary device. Give you an example. I inquired about a temporary device on my street in front of my house, perhaps, and I was told that we have acquired, since our police department no longer has the use of a speed trailer, we have acquired, you've seen these digital readouts that tell you about how fast you're going. They put them on a post. They can move them from place to place. When I was asking about having one in front of my house, They said, well, we got the equipment, but we don't have the dollars to physically put it in front of your house. So I'm elated that we're going to incorporate traffic calming when they rebuild my street. But it doesn't, in the short term, next year, they'll be addressing my street. But I'm also concerned about other residents here in Downers Grove that have petitioned for traffic calming. Studies have revealed that they need it on their street, but they're wanting for action from the council in funding in the budget. So I ask you to revisit this if you can. And I don't want to belabor it, but I believe traffic calming is a vital part, just like sidewalks, keeping them available, keeping them clean. All has to do with traffic safety and pedestrian safety. I thank you for listening to my comments. I don't want to be overzealous, but sometimes I can get that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roble. Good evening, Mr. Tillman.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, staff, council. My name is Mark Tillman, 1109 61st Street. This is a general comment about the budget. I was reading about staff supporting a 40% cash reserve policy. The current council-approved policy, and it is your job to approve this policy, is a 2 to 4 month cash reserve, which is 17 to 34%. This is just a process request that if you're going to change the cash reserve policy, that staff write up a policy for council to approve. Thank you.
Just some clarification on that. The 40% is a rule of thumb that's on fund balance, and our actual stated policy is on a cash basis, which is 17 to 34%. The rule of thumb is very close to the cash balance policy that the council has adopted. It's just a little easier math, but it falls into the acceptable range under the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Fieldman. Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Any other questions, comments, or statements from any members of the audience with respect to the proposed fiscal 2012 budget? Hearing none, I'll then bring this to item 4, which is once again to ask my colleagues whether any members of the council wish to make a statement or ask a question with respect to anything you've just heard or with respect to the fiscal 2012 budget itself. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, if anyone was offended in our last meeting by comments I made, I do apologize. I know I tend to get rather exuberant when talking about the issue of restoring funding for the Meals on Wheels and the transportation subsidy programs, and I know I do get carried away. Hopefully, last time we did settle the matter of Meals on Wheels not being a charity, that we know that we now can designate those funds not only to the program Meals on Wheels, but also to keep that money within Downers Grove. We also had a lengthy discussion on projections on the budget. There was a projection, and we started talking about $937,000, and we now know that because of the necessity for keeping the reserves, that we are now talking in terms of a projected about $80,000, of which at this time I am asking, I'm modifying my original request, and I'm asking to restore $40,000 for the transportation subsidy, which would restore it back to the pre-economic disasters that we've had the last few years, and restore it to what it was, and an additional $10,000 for the Meals on Wheels for a total of $50,000 out of the projected $80,000, and I realize that is a projected amount. I'd also like to take and address some of the issues that arose last time. For instance, the term special interests that were applied to seniors in certain groups. And the term special interest has kind of a bad connotation. It sounds negative. It shouldn't, but in this day and time, the term special interest does. If our seniors in these type programs are special interest, then issues such as people who support sidewalks are special interest. People who oppose sidewalks are special interest, whether they're talking about it on their street or whether the village in general. As Mr. Rowell would know, traffic calming itself is a special interest of his, and there are people who have problems with traffic calming or maybe the budgeting for it. So these are all interests that compete for the same dollars. And the people that I'm talking about, which includes seniors, not necessarily just seniors, who need home meals and transportation, they are unlikely, if you have a hard time leaving the home for shopping and for your basic meals, you're very unlikely to attend budget meetings and even take the time to write. But those people need to be addressed as well. And Commissioner Tully, a couple years ago, referred to competing interests, and it's a term I've adopted, and I hope we would avoid special interests and refer to as competing interests, because certainly there's a lot of competing interests affecting our budget. I'd also like to address some other concerns that seem to pop up, and it's a concern. I'm sure it's a concern we all have. There's a saying, the greatest good for the greatest number, and we keep thinking that in terms of sidewalks and streets and so forth. When we look at the greatest number, when we look at this $50,000 request, the number of people that will be affected on a daily basis are probably more than would be affected by adding a small section of sidewalk on a matrix that we've been working on for a long time, or a patch of streets. We also know that from our budget discussions that just budgeting more money for, let's say, for sidewalks doesn't necessarily mean that when we address those that in a couple of years we're going to be back there tearing up the same area and doing some other work. So I think as far as the greatest number goes, I think we get more bang for the buck in programs such as Meals on Wheels and the transportation subsidy. Also, there's also the greatest good. And I know we have core services, and it sounds like an excellent name to describe something as core service, but within that core is a basic need, an essential need, and that's for food, shelter, and clothing. So these two programs also address the basic issue of food. They also help people to maintain independence and stay in their homes, which addresses somewhat the shelter. And it also helps them to remain independent in their homes. Should they not have transportation, should they not have proper meals or nutrition, they are likely to move on, especially this vulnerable population, will move on to other programs that actually cost the taxpayer more. So hopefully that is the greatest good for the greatest number. Also, I know all of us have received a number of emails and comments and so forth regarding charity, taking from the rich, giving to the poor, comments about a Robin Hood society or an expression that involves something along the nature of redistribution of wealth. And if you really consider it, that's exactly what we're doing, is we are redistributing, but not necessarily in the way that you might think. Seniors age 65 and older are about 8.5% of our current population. Add to that seniors age 60 and over. Then you add 2% of the population that is considered disabled. There are also a number of people in the village who are unable or shouldn't drive for safety reasons, and they aren't considered disabled, but they shouldn't be on the road driving. So safely, we can say that approximately 10% of our population is involved here. 10% of those people pay property taxes and or sales taxes. We'll bring out the examples again. On property taxes, this is a dollar bill. On property taxes, 75 cents of every dollar that they pay goes to schools. And part of that 75 cents on that dollar goes to transport those children to and from school. Also, part of that 75 cents goes into nutrition programs for students at those schools. So what we have is a 10% of the population who has a problem with transportation and food actually paying property taxes to pay for transportation and food for children. Now, I realize that's a different taxing body. We are all one community, and so the village council or the village government is responsible for the balance of the population, not just the education of children. So if you want to limit that dollar of taxes to the village portion, well, 10% of those people are paying the taxes, and out of that, they're not getting a dollar's worth. Nobody gets a dollar's worth. But what we're asking for, or what I'm proposing with my 50 cents, is basically 1 penny of that dollar, not even a penny of that dollar, a portion of this dollar would go to Meals on Wheels. Less than a penny. As a matter of fact, I would have to take, and I brought a penny, but I wouldn't, and it's probably illegal to cut a penny in 8 pieces. So what we have here is a slice, one about the size of 1/8 of a penny, and that is what would be returned to these people, the 10% of the population, for the Meals on Wheels program and for the taxi subsidy program. So if we're talking redistribution, I think returning a small portion to a needy part of that population is certainly appropriate and not a redistribution of wealth. So with that, I know you've heard this many, many times. I know I've said it last week. It's a matter of political will. Is it something that we want to address the needs of a good portion of our citizenship? And I ask that we modify the budget, that we take the projected funds, should they come in as expected or more, and allot the $50,000 as I had mentioned. And I ask you all to please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments, or statements with respect to the proposed budget? Commissioner Schnell.
And I apologize, Dave, for not bringing this up when we talked today, but in the responses to the questions that you gave us, one of the things you talked about was the additional street sweeping, possibility of additional street sweeping, gosh, that's not easy to say, cycle. And you had mentioned the fact that it would be about $17,000, but that was more problematic than that. I do have a couple of questions, and I don't need it as part of the budget, because I think perhaps this would be a policy decision that we could make next year. But if indeed the contract is to be let again, and I don't know when this contract actually expires, but perhaps when it does come up again, if part as an option, we could put into the new RFP what the additional cost would be, if they could do it, and what the additional cost would be, because I think that would give us a better understanding. My concern is as we move towards NPDES 2 compliance, one of the things that my understanding is that you have to keep all these things out of the storm sewers. And just looking at the streets that have already been swept and the leaves that have fallen since then, that perhaps one additional during the fall would be advantageous. I know it's not possible now, but I'm trying to look towards the future and in compliance for some of this stuff in the future. So if you could just find out when the contract does come up for renewal and how involved it would be to ask for an additional bid, with an additional street sweeping in it, and whether or not that would be possible. At least from my perspective, that would be something I would like to see as a council member.
Okay, we'll get
Thank
you
you.
that information.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Durkin.
I just want to comment on what Commissioner Schnell said about that. It seems since I've been up here, we always talk about an additional street sweeping in the months of October, November, December. Can we just have staff, or I don't think it involves the council, to review how we do the street sweeping in the fall? Because it seems like they swept the street in October and all our leaves on our side of the town. And I know it's kind of hard to predict when to start, when not to start. But if there's some portion of leaves on the ground, we start the street sweeping than do it when the leaves are still green and it counts as one of the falls? I know it's hard to predict because whoever thought there'd be 2 feet of snow on the East Coast before Halloween either. I mean, it is what it is. But if we could just maybe look at that a little closer and even go historically backwards to find out, and look at historical data and if we added additional street sweeps in the fall months.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what Mr. Roble was talking about and just add some more context to some of the discussions we've had. I think we have talked about that subject of traffic calming quite a bit more in the last 3-4 months, LRFP plus budget, than maybe we have in the prior year at least. And for some context of the magnitude of all this, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but we took a rough, just kind of back of the envelope sort of look, and village-wide we had somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million to $1.5 million, and logical, sort of everybody knows, wish we could do it, traffic calming. And that is above and beyond what we already know we punted to after the new year via LRFP, approximately $3 million worth of work that needed to be done to maintain the existing assets we have that we can't afford to do. So there's Commissioner Roll, maybe that was what we should be. But I think that you'd find most up here, and certainly myself, in total agreement with you. It's just a function of we simply do not have enough money to do all the things we wish and know we should do, and that definition of not enough is in the multi-millions dollars range. What we did do through the LRFP and some of the street discussions for the budgeting process for 2012 is make real clear and real highlighted the fact that that subject was important enough to us that we were willing to expend both the effort and the resources to include it in any designs like with Nottingham or any other projects. That doesn't solve it for everybody or come anywhere close to filling that $1.5 million, but it's on our radar and it's not something we're likely to lose sight of. I think we'll all be talking about it as we figure out the LRFP issues that we kind of punted till after the budget. So, but thanks for keeping it in front of us. I think it's important to everybody up here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions from the council? Just a few things from my perspective. Some of these things I've said before, but for the benefit of continuity in the conversation. First of all, I just want to thank, and I know my colleagues also are very appreciative of all the hard work that went into putting this budget together from village staff. This is a long process that culminates at the end of the year, but I think, quite frankly, the minute we pass one budget, you start working on the next one. So it is a constant task to bring us in where we're at. And the fact that we have a balanced budget a proposed balanced budget for fiscal year 2012 with no real reduction in services or personnel and featuring not from any particular magic here, a one-time reduction in the property tax levy is pretty darn impressive. And that's not by accident. That's because of a lot of hard work by a lot of different people. And given that we're talking about $128 million and change budget, the fact that we're down to sort of the last slivers of the penny in our discussion here, to borrow Commissioner Waldeck's metaphor, is a very positive thing of which this community should be very proud. That said, just a few things with respect to what's been mentioned here today. Number one, with respect to traffic calming, I'll just add that we all know that a few years ago we weren't even talking about traffic calming, and now it's part of our daily conversation, and we do look for opportunities to incorporate those whenever we can. Obviously, we continue to try to do as much as we can with limited resources, and there are many competing interests, and that includes streets and sidewalks and stormwater and traffic calming. So while they all might individually warrant merit to be done, we have to try to figure out how we can get as much bang out of our buck as possible. So another word that is come up and maybe is not in favor anymore is bundling, where maybe even though a project is warranted now, you can try to package it with another project and get more out of it in the long run. That sometimes justifies delay. It's not necessarily a pleasant thing, but it's a reality. And of course, Commissioner Barnett points out that we build it, we have to maintain it. And if you don't have the funds to maintain it, then it may not be the wisest thing to build it, at least just yet. With respect to Commissioner Waldeck's renewed request to restore the village's financial support for It's basically for DuPage County Senior Services, but in particular, it's the application of the Meals on Wheels program. The request to restore funding for that program through the use of public dollars, I think it's been noted more than once that I think everyone understands and appreciates the strong differences of opinion on the issue, and that some on the council feel strongly that tax dollars should be used to support DuPage County Senior Services and the Meals on Wheels program, particularly as it benefits Downers Grove seniors. And others, on the other hand, feel strongly the other way, is merely a reflection of the firmly held opposing views on this subject within our community. There isn't consensus on this point. And I don't think that either position is insincere, logically flawed, uncaring, or somehow morally bankrupt. There can be no serious debate that DuPage County Senior Services is definitely worthy of support and that its services benefit a deserving segment of our community. But it has been pointed out that there are other deserving segments of the community, and that therein is where the debate lies. There are other organizations such as Family Shelter Services that might be able to make the very same claim to support for the village tax dollar. There are plausible, well-meaning arguments on both sides, and they continue to be made and have been made. As I said, there's just not consensus on the point, and so I don't see this as necessarily happening as part of this budget, but that's not to say that the issue is going to go away. In fact, I see it resurfacing annually. I think that it's not a situation of anyone here ignoring it. Clearly, it's been the topic of conversation every budget meeting we've had. I think it's more of a effort, and I expect that we will see an effort by this council, perhaps not part of the budget, because the budget necessarily deals with village tax dollars, public tax dollars, but as a conversation for, is there a way, is there an alternative way to address some of these issues with alternative resources, or perhaps in ways that can navigate around the most controversial aspects of the request and the ones that lead to the lack of consensus. And I think, and I know some of my colleagues agree, that there may be, albeit imperfect, but there may be ways to accomplish that goal. And I think you may see us take up some of those conversations. Whether they succeed or not is another story. But I think it's important for this community to know that this village is not uncaring or deaf to the controversy that exists in the community on this and related issues. I think what the challenge is going to be is to come up with creative alternative ways to potentially address them in ways that can engender broader support in both the community and in this council. We all have some ideas in that regard. None of them are fully developed enough to warrant discussion at this point in time, but I would like to think that with an open mind and a willingness to work diligently to overcome obstacles, that we might come up with a solution that may yet be satisfactory to the broader community on some of these points. So I simply just want to make that observation. And if I use the word special interest in some of my comments, it wasn't meant with the derogatory connotation that term has come up with in some corners. It's just simply that, by definition, any group that is a subset of a community with a shared common interest or common goals is a special interest group. I think competing interest is in fact a better term to use.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. It's just the one that came out.
It's your term.
Well, all the
I'm
better. I certainly did invent it. Last, with respect to, I did have one question on the transportation subsidy, and that is, not that this ever happens, but to the extent that the amount that's budgeted for 1 year is not fully used up, I mean, does that carry over?
No. It contributes to fund balance, which was part of an earlier discussion we had. So actually, it's tracking pretty close to estimates, and we could give a report at the end of the year.
Well, just looking at the trend, it's probably a hypothetical question on my part, and history would certainly suggest that it's never occurred. But I was just curious as to what would happen in that unlikely event.
Right. It would just contribute to fund balance in the general fund.
Okay. That's all I had. Since I kind of monopolized the conversation, if any of my colleagues had any other comments or questions, I'd certainly entertain them. Hearing none, thank you. And we're not done yet. This matter will yet become before the council for further discussion and ultimately a vote. And we do try to do that before the end of the year because Mr. Fieldman likes to have a budget when January 1 rolls around. At this point, then, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, thank you. The public hearing on the fiscal 2012 budget has been adjourned. That brings us to item 6 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. And I know that there is one item that is being removed from the agenda. That's item 6C, Resolution 0004-687. Do we need a motion to remove that, or we can simply state that it has been removed?
Correct.
Okay, well then I've stated that the item has been removed. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Mayor Tully, I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the amended consent agenda has been approved unanimously. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is our active agenda. We have 2 items. Do I have a motion to authorize $18,388.20 for membership dues for DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference for November 1st, 2011 through April 30th, 2012?
Mayor Tully, I move to renew the fiscal year 2011-2012 membership of DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference and authorize staff to submit prorated dues in the amount of $18,000.
$388.20.
It's 18 on this. $18,388.20 as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. I see and I'm very aware of the need for our staff to be able to network and communicate with other DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference members. I do have a problem finding value as an elected official with the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. We had a conversation very similar to this last year, and our requests for change, I feel, were not responded to. I was hoping for more efficiencies and better communication, more notice of legislation affecting Downers Grove and DuPage County, and I just haven't seen it. $18,000 for 6 months is a lot of money, and we need to consider each dollar as much as the next and the value we get for our expenditures. I won't be supporting this expenditure now, but I will be keeping a close eye if this measure passes on the interactions with our staff and the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. If processes improve, I will surely support this membership in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council?
I do, Mayor.
Commissioner Barnett.
I have a couple of comments, Mayor. Thank you. The reasons that we left the DMC, as I mentioned last week, remain, at least from my vantage point. I don't feel like we've received historically in the last couple of years when we were members good value for the tax dollars we were spending. I don't feel like our interests were well served. The DMMC, from my observation and what little involvement I had, demonstrated that the issues important to Downers Grove were not necessarily issues important to them as a whole. I think that other groups drowned out our voices, and I think that there was a pretty heavy emphasis on non-home rule communities and the things important to them to some degree, at the expense of those home rule communities that are out there, like Downers Grove. But most importantly for me, I've mentioned this before, I mentioned it in our last year's discussions, and I think again last week, when I've seen the DMMC engaged with our state and county officials, I was uncomfortable with their activities because they seemed aggressive and adversarial as a starting point. And those, to me, are kind of inconsistent with the values of our village, the values that this village has demonstrated when we interact with our neighbors, when we try and partner with our neighbors, when we try and work with other communities. And because in my mind, I think it's kind of a deeds before words sort of thing. I like Commissioner Newstead, have heard the comments about the changes, but I have not seen much. So therefore, I'll be voting no this evening. However, and a big however there, because like Commissioner Newstead and I think all 7 of us, what we'd really like is for this to be a very successful endeavor. So I recognize my colleagues' sincere desire to work through the DMMC and to end up part of an organization that really serves all of us and all the communities well. So I'm heartened by some of the promises that have been made last week. I'm encouraged by the recognition on the part of the DMMC that I think I heard that change is indeed needed to be made. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of that firsthand and experiencing it as members. Specifically, I'm looking forward to some legislative efforts that are, I think, more broadly focused on communities, both home rule and non. I'm looking forward to the continuation of the efforts that DMMC puts forth in sort of equitably working with the distribution of various grants throughout the county. But first and foremost, I'm looking forward to seeing an organization that indeed, not just word, recognizes the difficult straits that all levels of government in Illinois are in, whether it's the state, the county, the townships, or the communities that make up DMMC, and one that tries to foster cooperation and partnerships, and not turf wars, and not the protection of their own, on behalf of all the residents in the county. So there certainly is opportunity for that, and I'm going to sort of look on with high anticipation and a lot of hope that those kinds of sentiments will be exhibited by the group with our participation. So while I am going to vote no tonight because I haven't seen this yet, I am hopeful that it'll be fruitful. I also am placing a lot of faith in our mayor, who has indicated his personal intent to really participate, which I'm not sure that we did to our best and highest degree in the past either. So it's a two-way street, and I'm hopeful that some changes will take place that will really prove fruitful for us. However, I haven't seen it, and the stuff I heard last week doesn't inspire me to vote yes tonight. So I'm still voting no, but I'm sure we'll revisit this again soon.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments from the council? Briefly, from my standpoint, and some of this, again, I've said before, I don't think there's any need to debate the reasons why this village left the conference in the first place. Some of those have been articulated then, or some of them were articulated again here again tonight. But oftentimes when there's a relationship, sometimes there's a need to spend some time apart, and we did that. And I was interested to look back at some of the minutes when I was not here when the decision was made, and there was a desire to spend some time apart and then revisit it 6 months or a year later, and here we are. And I think that we've learned some things by our absence. And it's really the absence that, to me, is key in the reasons for wanting to try reconciliation. And that is, one can debate the value, and some comments have been made. Through some leadership efforts, we'd like to actually participate in enhancing that value ourselves. But I really see it as more of a measure of what the detriment has been from our absence. Now more than ever, the ability to cooperate, collaborate, and communicate with our peers in order to do some of the things that we need to in order to provide superior services at a increasingly difficult cost to our shared constituents is something that is hard to put a value on that. And it's hard to articulate or put a dollar amount on the situation not being in the room when important things are discussed that affect all of our residents. It's hard to measure that. So to me, there's a great value in being in the room and being part of the conversation as opposed to being excluded from the conversation. The value, I think, as has been noted, is something that we can certainly roll up our sleeves and work together with the leadership of the conference and our peers to enhance from both our perspective and those of the other members of the conference. And we are making that commitment to participate in a leadership role. And believe me, I'll be calling upon even some of my most critical colleagues with respect to membership to actually participate and see if we together can enhance the overall value. And then last but not least, and this is obviously something we're revisiting again. This is not a 20-year commitment. This is a short-term commitment, and we can revisit this at any point in time. I, as I'm sure we all are, very cognizant of the comments that were made by Commissioner Neustadt, Commissioner Barnett, and yes, we will be paying attention to that. But I will be voting in favor of this because I do think that there is value in returning to the fold, so to speak, and now stepping up and actually, to the extent that we ask for change, asking for it from within. Any other questions or comments? If not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Nay.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Nay.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes 5-2. That brings us to item 7B in our agenda, which is an ordinance regarding the annexation of 5899 Walnut Street to the Village of Downers Grove. May I have a motion to that effect?
Mayor Tully, a motion to adopt an ordinance annexing 5899 Walnut Avenue to the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois, as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the council? And I apologize, I forgot to ask for questions or comments from members of the audience in the last item. You have my sincere apologies. That was an oversight on my part. If anyone has a comment, and I know we just voted on it, but I can't go back in time. What I can do is invite you up to the podium to make a comment. Or we can take it later. That was my mistake. All right, seeing none, now we'll go back to item 7B. Are there any questions or comments from the audience with respect to item 7B, the annexation of 5899 Walnut Street? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. And again, my apologies on 7A. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which is our first reading. These are items that are more or less, this is the workshop portion of our meeting, where these are items that are coming up for presentation and discussion and consideration and will be voted upon at a later point in time. So at this point, it's customary to turn the stage over to Manager Fieldman for discussion of the two items.
There are two items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is an ordinance establishing truck traffic restrictions on Janet and Lacey Roads. And here to present information on this item is our Public Works Director, Nan Newman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item was initiated by residents on Janet Street who expressed concern about the amount of truck traffic using this street. Janet Street is a 21-foot wide local street that serves residential properties and is in close proximity to Ogden Avenue and to Lacey Road and to the commercial properties that are located on these streets. We have an exhibit that shows just kind of the street configuration here that was part of the TAP agenda. The red is the area we're proposing the truck restriction on Janet Street and on Lacey Road north of Janet Street. And there are commercial properties along Ogden Avenue and then along Lacey Road as well between Ogden and Janet. Trucks accessing these businesses have found it convenient to drive and to park on Janet Street. And staff has observed and residents have provided documentation of the nature of this truck traffic. Staff has determined that Janet Street is not designed to accommodate this traffic and that adequate access is available for these businesses from Lacey Road off of Ogden Avenue, and so is recommending to restrict trucks over 6 tons on Lacey Road from Janet Street to Virginia Street and on Janet Street from Lacey Road to Bel Air Lane. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this. It was presented at TAP at their October 5th meeting and was unanimously approved at that meeting.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Barnett?
Do we have any way, and maybe this isn't necessarily for Nan, to actually enforce this? Do we have those mobile scales that we can throw out periodically?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
I have a question, and I apologize I didn't ask this earlier. Is this weight class that we're voting on or discussing for potential vote restriction, is this not a common weight in all of our residential streets? Unless there's construction of a new home or road repair or whatever that may require the temporary traffic of a semi?
Our ordinance provides 2 different weight classes. One of them is for 6 ton, and I think one of them is for 5 ton. This weight class will provide for the normal type of delivery type vehicles, trucks to this road, but will restrict construction type of equipment that's accessing the businesses along Lacey.
Why would we have this kind of ordinance throughout all of our residential streets? We know our streets are deteriorating. We know that there's potholes, they're falling apart, and once we repair them, if we prevent the heavy usage, we're not going to run into, in my opinion, a lot of additional wear and tear. So why wouldn't we have that already? Why would we just have a segment of the red line and not just say we don't want any of these trucks over X amount of tonnage on Bonnie Brae, Saratoga, wherever you live?
Yeah,
Nottingham.
At the staff level, we have talked about a more comprehensive approach to weight limits, and that's something that's been on and off staff agendas given workload and staffing, so it's something we could consider as...
I'd be more prone to support that than support piecemeal, to be honest with you. To me, this is piecemeal, and I know why we're doing it, and I support why we're doing it. But I think if we're going to do it, we might as well do it village-wide. I mean, I don't want cement trucks and dump trucks and auto carriers going up and down any of our residential streets.
But sometimes they have to.
Then there's a need for it. Then they're excused. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Commissioner Newstead.
I found the answer to my question, but I'll ask it anyway for anybody watching. There will be adequate signage and stuff posted on Lacey Road for drivers coming to and.
Yes, the exhibit shows on the, where we would propose to put signage.
It's right there
To
and right
notify
here
drivers.
also, so, good, thank you.
And you talk about budget shortfalls. You get an overweighted semi. I have customers that this is what they fund their budgets with. And it's amazing what these overweight trucks carry. Thousands, 20s of thousands of dollars for overweights.
We do have a weight limit for all village streets, and these are weight limits that are even more restrictive than the overall weight limit, so I can get information to the council by next week. We do have an overall village-wide weight limit on residential streets, and we do have a program for allowing people to obtain permits, if needed, to exceed that weight limit on a temporary basis, so we can provide that information.
Okay.
And Commissioner Durkin, there is a part of the traffic unit from the police department has the mobile scales that Commissioner Barnett spoke about, and they actually, I've seen them pull vehicles over that appear to be overweight. There's a whole protocol behind how they can stop and do stop those vehicles. So maybe we can get some info on that.
Sure. The 2010-11 revenue is from overweight trucks?
Yes.
I just had a major deja vu moment. I seem to recall this being an issue about 5 or 6 years ago.
It was. Very similar.
Was it deja vu all over again? Is the Yogi Bear?
And you thought you were done.
Can I comment?
Please.
My only comment on all of this is it's great to do this, but unless we enforce it from the very beginning, it isn't going to work.
No.
And I think that was your deja vu moment, but we really do need to, as soon as this goes in, get the unit out there and make a concentrated effort to make sure that they know we're serious.
We have an ongoing enforcement issue in this neighborhood, and we have a staff member from many departments out there literally on a daily basis.
No, I understand that, but as far as the weight limits, I think if we do it from the very beginning,
Yes.
But you're going to get that when he gives us the report. You're going to see how active we are on this segment.
but as you said, we've had this discussion before, so.
We have indeed. Any other questions, comments, members of the council? Questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Sure, you want to sneak in something on mayors and managers, Mr. LaCroix? I'm going to pay for that. I'm sorry.
The next item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance amending provisions for the extension of liquor serving hours, and our village attorney, Enza Petrarca, is here to present information on this item.
Thank you, Dave. The proposed ordinance seeks to reduce the number of liquor sale extension requests from 8 per year to 4 per year, and also seeks to extend the liquor sales hours to 2 a.m. on 3 specific holidays, which is New Year's Eve, St. Patrick's Day, and Thanksgiving Eve. With these changes, as well as the recent changes to the Sunday morning liquor hours, as well as the Friday night extension hours, staff anticipates that the number of extension requests would be significantly reduced. These changes were discussed at 2 meetings of the Liquor Commission, both September and October, and they were recommended for approval.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item?
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 9, which is the mayor's report. And I'm glad to see printed here in ink is ComEd reliability report, because we are going to continue to talk about that. A couple of things, actually 3 things to report there. One, with respect to, and again, everyone realizes we had a town hall meeting a while back with respect to ComEd reliability issues and continuing to follow up in terms of not only what was committed to at that point in time, but also our additional requests for enhancements to the system that will provide and improve our reliability in Downers Grove. The first item is ComEd's Vegetation Management Department has been in contact with the village forester. ComEd has indicated and staff has confirmed with the External Affairs Manager of ComEd that all targeted tree trimming will begin in 2012 and will not take place before the end of 2011. However, ComEd is walking the areas now, and the External Affairs Manager has indicated they will provide the village with a report of what areas have been walked by ComEd's Vegetation Management so that residents and the village will know where they're going and what they're doing, I presume is the intent of that. Thank you. Second, additionally, ComEd has completed additional work in the area of the 100 block of 41st Street, which is in Circuit 458X. That sounds like a science fiction movie from the 70s. Circuit 458X is a circuit that ComEd identified as needing improvement in addition to what the village had requested in priority circuits. And we are tracking ComEd's progress on the village website, and that will be updated to reflect the completion of this work. You may recall this was an area of town where we had some of our most vocal residents speak out following the extreme power outages after this summer's extensive storms and severe weather events. And then finally, of course, I'm sure everyone is aware that Senate Bill 1652, otherwise known as the Smart Grid legislation, Governor Quinn's veto of that legislation was overridden by the Illinois General Assembly. However, there was also a trailer bill which was passed as part of that measure that included some, not all, but some of the consumer protection and reliability issues that many thought were lacking in the original bill. For example, the Northwest Municipal Conference had issued a white paper with respect to its criticisms of Senate Bill 1652. There was a model letter in that material that we adopted, modified, and sent out as far as this community's opposition to the attempt to override the veto of Senate Bill 1652 with the smart grid legislation. The trailer bill included at least enough additional measures that the Northwest Municipal Conference withdrew its opposition and changed its position to neutral on the attempt to override the veto. So again, the efforts of municipalities and some conferences and the way they work in terms of demanding better legislation was effective to some degree, although I don't think everyone got everything that they wanted. But that's the status on the smart grid legislation. So in terms of what the smart grid is supposed to add in terms of enhanced reliability, it doesn't do a whole lot for the actual infrastructure, but has been described as allowing for better, more specific, and faster recognition of where the problems are, so that presumably power can be restored more quickly, or at least in layman's terms, in a nutshell, that's what it comes down to, and there's more to it than that, of course. So that's the ComEd update for this meeting. Are there any questions or comments with respect to where we're at? And then again, this will continue to be an item on our agenda as we go forward. That's all I had under the mayor's report. That brings us to the manager's report.
One quick report from our communications director, Doug Kozlowski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here tonight to let everybody know about an opportunity that's going to be starting this weekend regarding electronics recycling in the village of Downers Grove on a regular basis. As you may know, starting in 2012, electronics will be prohibited from landfills throughout the state, and this is an opportunity, a way that we're providing a convenience to residents to be able to recycle electronics once a month throughout the year. And so beginning this week, November 5th, Saturday, November 5th, the village and Creative Recycling will offer electronics recycling on the first Saturday of the month. And again, that starts this Saturday, November 5th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The drop-off location is here at Village Hall. It'll be in the rear of the building off of Curtis Street. So we hope that everybody will take advantage of this opportunity. There's more information on our website. There is a complete list of everything that is acceptable as part of this electronics recycling program. And in addition to that, there's also a map that kind of outlines the traffic flow pattern that staff has arranged for this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's a great addition to services that we provide, because I know there were a lot of people that wanted to take advantage of the last recycling extravaganza, and due to overwhelming participation, not everyone was able to. So having this available on an ongoing basis is great. I think more and more of us have more and more electronics to recycle, and so this is really a great service, so thank you.
And that ends our report tonight, Mayor.
Any questions from the council with respect to the electronics recycling?
I have one. So if someone brings their hard drive, does that group destroy the information, or, like their big box part of their computer?
Only after I've downloaded it.
Well, I do understand that they completely dismantle all the equipment, and nothing is sold or reused in that part of the electronics that are brought in. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mayor. That brings us to Attorney's Report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 3 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance amending the provisions for the extension of liquor serving hours. Second is an ordinance prohibiting overweight trucks on certain streets. And an ordinance adopting the fiscal year 2012 budget in lieu of passage of an appropriation ordinance. All 3 of these items will be on next week's active agenda.
Thank you very much. Brings us to item 12, Councilman reports and new business. We'll start with Commissioner Waldeck tonight.
I have nothing, Mayor.
Commissioner Rankin.
I just wanted to report out that Mr. Neustadt and I attended the viewing of the underpass, and it was very enlightening. It was really interesting to see, and a great project that Downers Grove should be proud of. So, hats off to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. As the vote was passed tonight that we are now members again of DuPage Mayors and Managers, as the Mayor said, I do plan to actively participate as of our village and look to the manager and the mayor for ways that I can participate and be of assistance to become more involved with that organization. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be having that conversation very shortly. Before the ink is dry on the resolution. Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to take advantage of this minute here to say that I really appreciate Commissioner Waldeck's discussion tonight. Some of the arm wrestling verbally that we all go through over these periods and cycles is not that entertaining, but necessary. But I'm encouraged by the tone and the ideas that are put out there, and I really appreciate that. I also am encouraged and heartened by the mayor's renewed interest in the subject, that it doesn't just die tonight. Because it is very real, and it's something that I think we can probably collectively do quite a bit of good on trying to fill holes and find ways, unique and interesting ways to make some real progress. I know that our emotions go up and down, particularly over the last 8 meetings or whatever we've had, and so from where I sit and for my part, I appreciate both of your efforts tonight, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys down the road to find some way to make some progress on the subject matter, because you're right, it's not going away. And Commissioner Waldeck is right, every bit of it is serious and real. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, I have a couple of things, Mayor. First is the first meeting that the Village of Downers Grove will be able to participate in is going to be November 16th. It's the monthly conference business meeting at the Embassy Suites in Lombard for the DuPage Mayors and Managers, which starts at 6 o'clock. So I know I will be in attendance, and I look forward to the others as well. I just want to thank whoever got this going. 63rd and Main Street, the old Amoco gas station, the wrecking ball has landed, and it's actually being torn down. Mr. Bedloff is pointing to himself back there as a former EDC board president, or president of the organization. Thank you. If you had something to do with it as Choose DuPage, thank you. But I believe our own EDC was on top of that one, because I gave that as a marching order if I could do such thing. And that leads me to believe, what is the status of the 75th and Lamont Road, old Amoco gas station? I know we've done extensions upon extensions for them. I don't need a report right now, Manager Fieldman. If we could just get that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Will do.
I passed out, including not only to council but also to staff, the Global Credit Portal by the Standard & Poor's. It's an interesting read. It's a short read. And the topic that they discuss in this particular publication is Ready for the Big One, How Natural Disasters Can Affect U.S. Local Governments' Credit Quality. So as we talk about the budgets and everything that we'd like to see done, one of the biggest things that they look at when they rate communities such as Downers Grove and many others is their liquidity reserves. So as you read this, you will see that it's rather interesting how they, this particular rating agency, Standard & Poor's, looks at natural disasters. And some of the areas that they look at, that they focus in on, is if there's any past experience that the municipality, even school districts have had with natural disasters, how quickly have they responded and gotten back up and running and on their feet. So I encourage you to read that, and I did give it a copy for the minutes for the meeting itself to April. We were talking about, Mr. Robo brought up traffic calming. One of the things that I know that the City of Chicago worked through the legislature of Illinois was speed cameras in school zones. I'd like to know if we can look at that as an option for traffic, not traffic control, speed control, using red light cameras, or not red light, but the speed cameras similar to that of a red light that monitors the speed in a specific designated school zone area. I know that there's a Downers Grove company here that actually is one of the leading providers of that equipment. So if we could look at that, I can get additional information for council and for staff so there's more clarification of what I'm asking about. But I thought they were referred to as speed cameras, school zones. Let's see here. And the last thing that I have to point out is just want to wish huge success to the Downers Grove South football team. They'll be taking on Brother Rice this, I believe it's Thursday night at 7 o'clock here in our own hometown. I had the opportunity to go to the game last Friday. It was rather interesting to see all the people that were there and how large of a turnout our hometown had versus that of the Naperville side. So I wish them great success. I know there's a lot of alumni that live in Downers Grove that went to Brother Rice, but unfortunately we will outnumber those and cheer on our mighty Mustangs. So with that, that ends my report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
Just to comment about what has been said by Commissioner Barnett and Commissioner Waldeck and Mayor Tully. I, too, am encouraged just by the fact that we could actually talk about it tonight and not have emotions run high, and I think that's a positive first step. I'm hoping that perhaps if we can have a policy discussion outside of the budget process itself, that it actually may help to facilitate an exchange of ideas that may show that there's more agreement than disunion. And sometimes when you start crunching numbers and trying to figure out figures, that perhaps that gets in the way. So I'm hoping that come January or February, when things hopefully will be a little bit slower, we could have a discussion about this and maybe come to some mutual agreement. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully it will come to pass.
Thank you. A few things from my standpoint. First of all, I know it's not. We'll have a meeting before we actually leave, but we were talking about cooperation, collaboration, communication, and working with our peers and learning from our peers and being part of the conversation to come up with ideas. And who knows, we may actually come up with some ideas and learn something from other communities that we can use here, and other communities learn from us, and that's how we all do better by one another. As some of you already know, Commissioner Schnell and I will be representing Downers Grove at the Congress of Cities, which is put on by the National League of Cities, which is this year being held in Phoenix. And it is truly a remarkable opportunity to learn from peers, because cities from all over the country come together, and this will be next week after our council meeting, come together and discuss ideas on a variety of topics. And this year there will be a focus on a number, including some of our favorite topics here in Downers Grove, like green cities, economic development, and infrastructure. And so we are going to make a point to learn as much as we can from our peers, both from the formal programs as well as from the informal discussions, and bring those back to Downers Grove. And if anyone doubts whether anything of significance has come back from some of these participations, I know the traffic calming was one issue that Commissioner Durkin brought back from a National League of Cities, Congress of Cities exposition, and then some will like this, some won't like this, but the idea of a stormwater utility actually came back from one of these meetings 10 years ago. So there are other ideas out there, and the opportunity to have meaningful conversations with our peers and pick and choose what might work in Downers Grove is very valuable and hard to put a price tag on. The next item is, I just want to remind everyone that, of course, our own Indian Boundary YMCA is holding one of their annual fundraisers this year on November 12th, and that is, of course, the Dance Like a Star fundraiser that is at 6 o'clock p.m. on that Saturday night, November 12th, which is a big night in Downers Grove, because that's also the big event that Good Samaritan Hospital is holding that same evening, not too far away, actually. And then Dive Hard is holding their annual Luau fundraiser, also on November 12th. So there's no shortage of places to go and things to do in Downers Grove on November 12th. So pick your favorite place, your favorite organization, or try to visit all of them, because they're all good organizations, obviously benefiting our community. And last but not least, I would just like to indulge my colleagues and use a little bit of mayoral prerogative because it's not often that I can do this. November 1st is my oldest son's 17th birthday, so I just want to wish my son, Martin Jr., a very happy 17th birthday. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.
Did you pick that up at the end just to make me laugh?
I just shut off everything.